So my sense of your support of Trump, but please correct me if I'm wrong, is not that you love him or his policies.
Don't go support. Well, I don't want to go too far with that word hanging out there, right?
And you've said some interesting things about your support of Hillary. So, so correct me if I'm wrong. That it's not that you're necessarily supporting Trump, but you like the techniques, or you at least understand the techniques that he's using to get his message across. And I think they're very much in line with some of the techniques that you just described to me. Is that a fair estimation? And I'll backtrack the word support if necessary.
Let me put it in my words and put the context here. I don't think that anybody who's about 70 years old should get hired for a job that requires great mental agility, flexibility, high energy, and even staying alive, which is very important. To do the job of a president.
But they keep saying he's high energy.
Be alive. Right. So it's hard for me to get on board either of those choices, because really 320 million people in the United States, and the best we could get is two 70-year-old racists. Yeah. Or bigots, depending which side you're looking at.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Both bigots. And secondly, my political views don't really align closely with either one of them.
Right.
But that said, what I noticed last year was Trump had an influencing or an influencer's tool set. Mm-hmm. He had the skills of a hypnotist, the skills of persuasion that I immediately said, bing, fairly early on last year, and said, that's not normal. Mm-hmm. What he's doing is technique that people don't understand. He's just a better persuader. And so I'm a big fan of his persuasion talents, and I think people need to understand that in context, and maybe not think of him as the crazy clown, right? Because lots of times there's intention there, and there's a lot of strategy, and he's playing the long game in a lot of ways. Yeah.
So can you describe that part of it? That a lot of people will say, well, he's just nuts, or he says anything, and it's just all crazy and all that. But what you're saying really is that there is a method to this madness. He's not just walking up there every day and saying crazy things with no plan. That there's an actual plan, and it's pulling some of the tools that you're talking about.
Yeah, plan might be overstating it, because who knows, in this kind of context, how far in advance they really can plan, or how much makes sense. But definitely he is saying, how can I control the most energy? All right, so persuasion is about making somebody focus on your thing until they think it's important. Because the human brain is so dumb that it thinks whatever it pays attention to the most is the best.
Right.
Or the worst, or the most important. But anyway, in their minds, its priority arises.
Right.
Now, as long as he doesn't, make too many people think he's the worst, the attention alone is a positive, right?
So that's basically the heart of it, right? That it's an attention game that he's using, and that's why it was so easy to dispatch the 16
It's a pretty big
others.
toolbox.
Yeah.
But if he had to mention one thing that's sort of, a shining object in it, would be manipulating attention. But he also manipulates attention away from things he doesn't want. So my best example is during the first debate a year ago, when Trump was asked about his comments about women in the past. Now, this was a trap that nobody can get out of. Right? You can't say, there's nothing you can say, because now the media has made people's attention on these bad things. So just focusing on it makes them seem higher priority. And what does Trump say? He goes, only Rosie O'Donnell. And suddenly all the energy sucked out of the question and went to this visual person who was disliked, at least by the base. The Republicans could be counted on to have an extreme reaction. So it's a face. Whenever you can put a face to something, a personality, and a visual, all the energy just sucks into the room. And that was the moment I got out of my chair. I said, wait a minute, this is not normal. And then I watched to see if he could repeat it, and he kept doing it and doing it.
Yeah.
And then by the time he was doing the low energy thing, I think I was the first person probably in the country who said, okay, that's not a random insult, that's the end of Bush. He's dead. And the reason is that his, what I call linguistic kill shots, are not just insults. That's what people thought in the first part. These are engineered, right? So look at low energy, how engineered this is.
Right.
He takes something that hasn't been used before in the political realm. It's not the usual thing you say in politics. So therefore he can imbue it with his own meaning, right? It's his own thing. Then he picks something that matches the physicality of the person. That's another big trick.
Right.
There's something when you look at him, you say, yeah, that feels right.
Right.
Now, here's the thing. Before he said that, before he reframed Bush as being low energy, I think most people had the same impression I did. I looked at that guy and I said, you know, he looks like a calm, seasoned executive. He looks like he would be unruffled
Right.
in even a nuclear war. That's exactly the kind of executive I want running my country. And then Bush says low energy, and every time you look at him after that, you go, well, it does look a little low energy.
Yeah.
And you don't even know why that's bad, and yet it feels sort of bad. So now he's created, here's the other part that's important. He creates a trap for confirmation bias, so that everything that Bush does, using his normal personality, makes you think, oh yeah, and so his label reinforces over time. Same with Lion Ted Cruz, all right? Ted Cruz unfortunately has a little bit of a distrustful face.
Yeah,
right? He's just
something kind of slimy there.
Some people just have that face, right?
Yeah.
And because he's a politician, he's going to say things that aren't true, like all of them, right?
Right.
But because he got the tag, your confirmation bias will go to everything he says. Wait, he's lying, he's lying.
So is that really the genius of this, that he said Lion Ted Cruz and he calls her Crooked Hillary, when there's every evidence to believe that someone could call him those things and be just as truthful, if not more truthful, than he's being, right? Because he's taken every position. We can talk about some of the immigration stuff, but he's already scaling that back.
And so, well, it's important to pick the one that people are already sort of primed to believe, or there's something about his physicality that would make them easily believe it. Trump, there's a lot of things you can say about him, but what Clinton has finally jumped on that was sort of late in the process, because she was fighting Bernie and that was a different fight. But at this point, she's going with the racist, irrational racist thing.
Yeah.
And that too is an engineered kill shot. I believe, I'm reasonably certain that she has professionals working for her, one in particular that I've nicknamed Godzilla.
Okay.
Godzilla is my pet name for Robert Cialdini, who wrote the book Influence, who would be considered the monster of persuasion. If you were going to hire one person to persuade the world,
this is the guy.
That's the guy.
Okay.
And apparently he did consult on Obama's campaign. So it would be surprising if he had not been asked, at least, but I don't have confirmation of that. But I do know that Clinton went from having no persuasion game at all, talking about facts and her experience and her policies, and realizing that that wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
And then she went full Trump this summer and said, forget about all my facts and policies. I mean, she's not forgetting them, but she's not emphasizing them.
Right.
You want to be real scared of this guy. Okay, and here's the best part. Trump was using fear as a persuasion technique, because fear is the best thing you can do, right? You scare people, they have to fix that first. You fix your fear first, then you work on the other stuff. So he said, look at these terrorists coming in, look at the criminals crossing the border, look at the economy falling apart. Now, whether or not any of that's true, it generates fear. Fear is real good for persuasion. Then what did Clinton have? She had her facts and her experience. That's nothing.
Right.
And then she ratcheted up and said, no, the real fear is Trump, right? Because Trump is saying, maybe you got a fear from a terrorist, but if you think about it, what are the odds that a terrorist is going to kill you?
Right.
Low. So that fear is good fear. It worked, but it's not like a comprehensive fear that gets everybody. Then Clinton said, if Trump gets in the office, he's going to have his finger on the nuclear codes, and you're all dead. And suddenly she got all kinds of purchase, and and her poll numbers started rising.
Right. I mean, she basically has a commercial out right now saying exactly that. So,
right.
So do you think there was a calculated, what does that say then, I guess, about the Clinton campaign, that pretty much this all went down last week? Like, this all seems to have come to a head last week with the big speech calling him a racist, linking him to alt-right and Breitbart, and we'll get into all that. Do you think there was really a sit down where they said, man, the technique he's using is really working, and we have to now shift you out of policy and all that stuff? Or was it just, it's sort of low-hanging fruit to call someone a racist? They're doing it to each other now. It's just, oh, you're a racist, you're a racist. It's become meaningless, I think, for the most part. The word has become sort of meaningless. But do you think there was a real calculated sit-down, like the technique he's using is working, we better start playing ball this way?
They're both doing what I call A/B testing. It's a word from the technology world where you're testing one technique and then you measure how well it does, and then you test another, and if that works better, you go with this one. If this one works better, you try yet another one to see if that's even better until you get the best one. There's no doubt that they found out their other attacks weren't working. I think there was a WikiLeaks saying that they thought attacking him on his business acumen wasn't working because people sort of had in their mind that he was good at that stuff. Whether that's true or not.
Right, so they show you some bankruptcies, but they go, but wait a minute, he still has buildings everywhere, so whether it's true or not.
Yeah, the trouble with the bankruptcy story is his name is on 500 entities. And yeah, 4 of them didn't go well. So that's actually more like a home run than a failure, you know, in an entrepreneurial sense. So yeah, I think that they tested until they found that the racist thing is the one that stuck. And because of the way he talks, his unfiltered method and the policies that he's put out, they attract confirmation bias. For those watching who don't know what confirmation bias is, it's a well-known mental phenomena where if you think something's true, you imagine every bit of evidence to support that,
right?
Whether it is not. You'll see it that way once you've decided.
Right.
And by the way, that's what the hypnotist learns. The hypnotist learns that once you've decided, which is an irrational decision, that there is no such thing as data and ration or logic. Just doesn't exist.
That you basically will then just go through life finding just the things that validate what you have presupposed way back when.
And let me prove that beyond any doubt. If rational thinking and logic existed, there would only be one religion. We would all just figure it out. There would be mostly people all on one side in these political events. Not every time it's about 50-50.
Right.
What are the odds of that, right?
Yeah.
Like, or I asked the question once, where do all the smart people come out on this? Like, if you polled only smart people,
right,
well-educated, really well-informed smart people, would they all have the same opinion? No.
Right.
No.
Right.
If there was anything to logic and data and thinking, if thinking were a real thing, like we were really, taking the right data and making the right decisions, people would mostly be on the same side in these political questions. Even if it's 75-25, it would be overwhelmingly, on one side, but they're not.
So as someone that cares about thinking and critical thought and being smart and all of that stuff, this has to be a little depressing for you, right? I mean, as you already said, the 70-year-old part and all that, and we've only selected just these two, but just the general discourse has to be kind of depressing, right?
Absolutely not, because remember, since my 20s, when I learned hypnosis, I've abandoned the idea that anyone is rational, including me. So once you abandon that, the world becomes far less frustrating, not more. So look at the world that the rest of you are living in. And I feel sorry for you bastards living in this world. Because you're looking at the people who are on the other side of a political debate and you're saying, why can't they see the logic, the rational arguments that are so clear to me? And the answer is always the same. You're an idiot. Yeah. But guess what?
They're thinking
they are too.
Yeah.
And they're having exactly the same thought with their set of confirmation bias, and they're so sure that they're right. So sure.
So basically you're saying you, Scott Adams, don't have any of the answers, right? But you're just saying this is the game, so we have to deal with it in that reality.
Well, I have all the answers if you're talking about the political stuff.
You've got all the answers?
We haven't gotten to that yet.
Yeah. Well, let's go. Oh, you wait, before we get to all the answers, that'll be a better thing to probably end with, all the answers to everything. Maybe we'll wrap up the show. I could end the show if we get all the answers.
Yeah.
We'll see. But I'm curious, so the racist word, we've talked about it a lot on this show, that one of my issues has been how the left has used the words of bigotry and racism and homophobia and all these things. They've used them so much to smear their opponents that these words no longer have any meaning, really.
Totally disagree.
Really?
Yeah, racist never loses its power.
Even now? Because my feeling was
absolutely not.
They both were firing at each other, and it didn't feel like it took anymore.
Oh, no, it's taken.
Yeah?
It's taken big time. Yeah. If you talk to the average Clinton supporter about what they think of Trump, and this is something I've not seen in any other election, you'll see the person who dislikes Trump physically shake.
Yeah.
I've seen people talk about him and their hands shake like this. A lot of people. I mean, this is not just a few observations. It's common that people will spit and yell and shake. And that's because the racist claim sticks. It's not because they think his policies aren't as good. They prefer this approach. It has nothing to do with that. They think he's actually a racist. They've literally been convinced.
So that's that subset of Clinton supporters. My suspicion, though, is that the average person out there hears the word racist, sees the way these things have been overused, and the way we label everybody, and goes, It actually, in a way, especially if you take the Trump supporters, every time you call them a racist, they like it because they feel like you've lost the argument. So that's the word you're throwing out there.
There's confirmation bias in action.
Oh, I guess that's the best example of it. Someone calls you something bad, and you go.
So the Trump supporters believe either they're not racist or it's not a problem, and so they imagine a world in which those insults are ineffective. But they are totally effective. It's the strongest sauce you could possibly put on this spaghetti. Terrible analogy.
Well, that kind of it was there. It was there.
Yes, and it's the reason Clinton's using it, and I'm sure they've tested everything else and found out, wow, this is super.
Yeah.
But let me get back to the confirmation bias.
Yeah.
So look at the charge and look at all the things that Trump is accused of, and we'll just pick any one out of the bunch. Let's take the Judge Curiel thing where he said that the judge couldn't be biased because in Trump's words, he was Mexican. Now you hear that, and even to my ears, that's like,
Yeah, the judge would be biased, not couldn't be biased, right? Right, okay.
So even to my ears, that's like, that's like a little red flag there. Well, you back it up. If you talk to someone who was born in this country and their parents came from Mexico, what do they call themselves? Well, they're Americans, obviously. They call themselves Americans. But in casual conversation, they'd say, I'm Mexican. Same way if you're Italian blood, but you're 2 generations away from Italy, people still say, yeah, I'm Italian. It's understood you're also American.
Right.
Those are just separate. So he used the language the way people use language. Right. So far, he's not a racist. He just used the language the way people do. But he went further. He said that because of that, you would be biased. Now, you know who's biased? Every fucking person in the world. Every person in the world is biased. There's no such thing as the unbiased person.
Yeah.
There's a reason that juries pick, lawyers kick people off of juries because of their experience that is biased. There's a reason that a judge can recuse himself or herself because they know they're biased, right? So to imagine that someone who has, let's say, Mexican heritage, and presumably their relatives are Mexican. Maybe he's visited Mexico. I don't know if that's true. But at the very least, he's got a family influence. What is more influential on your decision making than your family and how you have to live with them for the rest of your life? Imagine this judge ruling inexplicably favorably for Trump and then attending his next family reunion. All right? Now remove Mexican. It doesn't matter who it is. If this guy does something that's unpopular with his family, that's a problem. Now, that's the perfect setup for a human. Forget that he's a judge, forget his heritage. Any human in that situation is almost guaranteed to be biased. Now, the question is, he's a professional judge. Can he see past that? That's his job.
Right.
Of course, right? But it's still smart for Trump to put that out there, because he's persuading. All right, it's a legal case,
right?
And both sides are trying to persuade as hard as they can. So Trump is putting it out there. He says, "Hey, and he's also persuading the public in advance. If I get a bad judgment, I'm going to say people in this situation can be biased. If I get a good judgment, I'm happy. I go away." So,
well, he's not doing it as subtly as you just laid out, saying, well, this guy might be biased in a calm, the way you calmly laid it out. He goes to the easier, but you're saying that's the whole point.
That's why he gets attention.
That's the whole point.
Yeah, he gets attention. So it's the attention on it that makes it powerful. So if you were to pick this apart as a legal strategy and pick the actual words, there actually isn't any racism there. It is a comment about somebody who has a race, and in this case, has a cultural heritage. Is that a better word?
Yeah.
But everybody is influenced by all of their influences, right?
Right.
Their family influences, their job they worked at, their background, all of that.
Right. I suppose the inherent problem with it in that case is that had this judge been white, of Irish descent or Italian descent or some other European descent, you acknowledge he would have certain biases, but Trump would have never figured out a way to bring up his ethnic background in that context.
Let me give you your example right back to you. Let's say Trump is doing some business in Scotland, which he is. Let's say the people in Scotland got really mad at him and formed a petition, and the people in Scotland just hated him.
Yeah, I think they're doing this over that golf course, aren't they?
Right. So let's say there was a second-generation Scottish judge. I think even Trump has some Scottish blood, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So in that case, if a Scottish judge who had Scottish parents was involved, and he knew that the Scottish parents living in Scotland were really, really mad at Trump, would it be fair to say that the Scottish judge, who was really an American citizen with Scottish background, could be biased? I think so. I mean, wouldn't you?
Right.
Is that not reasonable?
Yeah, so basically all you're doing really is just peeling back you're showing the wizard behind the curtain here. So more than anything else, right? You're not defending the specifics of what he's doing.
Oh no, in this case what I'm doing is giving the listeners an example of what confirmation bias looks like.
Yeah.
If you heard the Judge Curiel comment out of context, it does sound like a racist statement. Once you put it in its proper context, that goes away. And that's how confirmation bias looks. It looks just like that.
Yeah. Do you blame, I don't sense you have a lot of blame in general, but do you prescribe the symptom of Trump to just everything that has transpired over the last 20 years? Just our terrible media that doesn't challenge politicians, our discourse that's crumbled to the point of just yelling racism at everybody, our politicians who lie. I don't think Trump is any bigger of a liar than Hillary is. I think she's probably a bigger liar, everything being equal, but he lies in a more of a regular person way, and that makes people freak out. She lies in more of a politician. Like, it just all led up to him. In a way, it seems kind of obvious.
Well, we don't live in a single variable world, so you needed everything to be the way it is plus Trump to get the result you have. You can't remove one of the important variables, and there are lots of them. But I think the key variable, and this is what I've been saying, is Trump's skill, his skill at persuasion. That is the story. I don't think you could take a non-Trump, put him in the same world in 2016 and say, the world is crazy and the media is this. I don't think you could drop Kanye West into there yet, although I've said he does have some really high persuasion skills, but he doesn't have some of the other stuff. So yeah, I think it's a Trump-specific phenomenon.
Yeah, so, all right, so I don't sense full Trump support, correct? Is that, well, you're not,
support, I never support the use of support in terms of what I talk about.
And yet at the same time, I think a lot of people think you're like one of the biggest Trump supporters out there, and it's really just because you're talking about his technique.
Well, I'm an admirer of his technique. I, unlike many people, am very amused by his humor and his personality. And by the way, before we were filming, you mentioned you have a New York background, as do I, from upstate New York. And I haven't talked to too many New York people about this, so I'm going to run this by you, this thought.
I went to SUNY Binghamton, by the way. That was another piece of my New York.
I was at Hartwick.
Is that right?
Oh my God, we're practically neighbors.
There you go.
At the wrong times. What was I talking about?
Upstate New York.
Upstate New York. Yeah. So when Trump talks in these ways that offend the world, I, as a New Yorker, say, that's not offensive talk. That's just talk.
Yeah.
That's just how I talk. One of the things I had to learn to change when I moved to California is that when I talked like New York people talk, upstate or city, there's a bluntness that is offensive. Yeah. And I had to really work on that. Also, there's an arrogance or a perceived arrogance of New Yorkers because we talk honestly about things we're good at. We also talk honestly about the things we're bad at, but that kind of gets lost in California. Right. It's like, oh, you have a big ego. No, I said I'm good at these things. I'm bad at these things. Just like you. Right. Just like everybody. We're all good at something. We're bad at something. How is that terrible? But the things that New Yorkers do is they say, man, I want to punch that guy in the nose. He needs 2 bullets in the back of the head. I'll give him 2 in the chest, 1 in the head. It's just normal New York talk. Yeah. But you see that out of context. And by the way, I think this is purely a Trump mistake, meaning that I don't think there's somebody telling him, wait, this stuff doesn't sound the same as soon as you leave as soon as you leave your state.
Right.
It really doesn't sound the same.
Yeah, it's funny because I was just telling you, I visited New York for the last 10 days. I got back yesterday. And even though I lived there my whole life, one of the things that I really noticed about being in New York City for 10 days was the incredible, racial mix, and every type of person on earth is in that city, on subways together. We're not killing each other. We're pretty much just ignoring each other because everyone's going to live their lives. And I thought there's something actually beautiful about that. It doesn't matter ultimately if these people privately hate each other for racist reasons or anything, but they're all out there living their lives. That's not to say there isn't any crime or any bad racism or something like that, but I thought that was actually inspiring about New York, that we're told we live in this society that's so frayed and everything, and yet our best city has everybody. And we're doing it.
Yeah, I love that example. And to that point, I'm going to steal something that I heard Dr. Laura say once. I'm kind of, maybe modifying the words a little bit, but I'll credit her for the thought. Mm-hmm. And the thought is that you are what you do. You're not what you think. Because if we were judged by our thoughts, we would all be executed. You should be killed for just the things you're thinking.
Right. That's coming, but not yet.
Yeah, you are what you do, and more importantly, you are what you do recently. Because if I'm judged by my past, I got some problems. If you're judged by your past, you probably got some problems too. We were all in our 20s once, right? It's all bad stuff in the past.
Yeah.
The goal of life is to improve. So if we're not improving, we got a problem, right? I think both Clinton and Trump have probably improved. And I think that judging them, either one of them, by something that happened, say, 10 or more years ago, is probably a bad bet, because we're all bad people 10 years ago compared to how we are now. Because ideally, we're all getting better, smarter, better informed.
Well, the hope is, but people do obviously go the other way too.
So when people are judging, for example, Trump for let's say his recent focus on African Americans, and say that's in his mind, he's not thinking that, I say you're on the wrong page. What counts is what he's doing, and what he was doing before wasn't as good, because he wasn't mentioning other groups in society, and now he is. So he's gone from less good to good. If doing the right thing doesn't count anymore, what the fuck, right? I mean,
so that's really fascinating. So when they take something like the immigration thing, where he said we're going to kick them all out day one, then he tempered it this past week, and then it sounds like he untempered it by saying, first hour in office it's going to start or something. Those are all crazy comments. Like, we're not getting rid of everybody. Then the tempering actually, I thought, sounded somewhat sane, and then I'm going to do it in the first hour sounds completely insane. But at that point, is there what?
So that's not crazy at all.
No?
Absolutely.
So I get it. He's using the tools you're talking about. Yeah. But so I understand that, but is there anything that he could say, do you think, that would turn off his people? Because immigration was their number one thing, and he pretty much, even Ann Coulter was acknowledging it, like he backed off that because he was trying, I think, to become better, to become a more legitimate candidate.
Yes.
So he had to throw them under the bus.
The
people who believed it.
I would put it in these terms. In hypnosis, there's something called pacing and leading. Pacing is when you match your subject in any way. You match their breathing, the way they talk, the way their posture. Because if you do that long enough, people get comfortable with you, and then you can do what's called leading. So then you can do something different, and then people will start doing that thing that you're doing. So you start by copying them, until they learn to copy you subconsciously. They're not doing it intentionally. It's one of the biggest components of hypnosis, is that idea. What Trump is doing is pacing and leading the entire Republican Party. What you think he's doing is that he's gone in and his ideas are a little different, and somehow with his, he's punched his way through the top. That is not what he's doing. He hollowed out the GOP, and he's wearing it as a skin right now. When he's done, the Republican Party will never be the same. Yeah. He has changed it, and he has improved it. He got on stage at the Republican convention and did a full-throated, what I thought was completely sincere, endorsement of doing more to help the LGBTQ community. Peter Thiel spoke. He meant it. And what happened with all the Republicans? As soon as he did that, you don't hear anybody complaining about that, right?
Yeah.
And not that they would have complained necessarily, but the Republican Party changed. Trump changed them, and they can't go back. He paced them until he led them. And on immigration, he paced them. He said what they needed to hear until they said, Trump, 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 he's our guy, I feel good with you. Now he's in a position to lead, all right? The Democratic side, they were already there. You know, they wanted something kinder and gentler. And by the way, so do I. I want this to be dealt with in the most humane way that also makes sense for the country. But it's a little bit like, but slightly different than Nixon goes to China. You know, Nixon was a hard ass about China, so when he went there, people believed him that he wasn't just selling out, he was still Nixon. People believe that Trump is still Trump. And if he sold them that he had their interests in mind, which he totally did, all right, for his Republican base, he said, I hear you about this immigration, I'm gonna make it my top priority. He paced them, they trusted him, they got on his side. Now, Trump and nobody else can soften that position. No one else is in that position because of the way he did it. But it looks to the public like it's a flip-flop. It's the opposite. I'm sure it was intentional from the beginning.
Right. So you would say that, you know, I saw a lot of people that after Peter Thiel spoke and Trump had that nice moment actually where he said the thing about LGBT Americans, and he got what I think was a pretty spontaneous applause break from the crowd of base Republicans, right? You know, I saw that a lot of people after that were saying, well, still look what's in the party platform, and there's still stuff that's not great on marriage equality and a few other things. But you would argue that's basically irrelevant at this point because he's the head, he's the leader, and he's made the acknowledgement. So
well, they're not done. I mean, everything's a work in progress, right? But I think Trump's support of the LGBTQ, I lose all
whatever, a bunch of letters.
Community was both sincere and a higher priority than the wedding cakes. And guess what? I think the wedding cakes will be all okay, and the weddings. I think the Republican Party will catch up in that sense.
So is that the irony, the ultimate irony of Trump more than anything else, is that while these people get shaky when you're talking to them and angry and stammering and sweaty and all that stuff, that he actually became the Republican nominee by basically being pro-gay marriage. He's not going to try to flip gay marriage. He's for, you know, gay people to live equally, basically. And at the same time, he's been running anti-war. He certainly doesn't want a nation build. That's pretty obvious. He wants people that we're giving things to pay us, all of that stuff. So he actually sort of killed the neocon part of it and killed the Christian conservatives. Like he slayed them both on the way. So he should have become the left's favorite Republican in a bizarre way.
And maybe still will. I mean, I'm still predicting that he'll win in a landslide. I know the polls don't look like that right now, but they're tightening as we're talking.
How much of that do you think is just that there's a certain fear of saying you're for Trump? So people don't poll properly?
Probably a lot of it. I know a lot of people who say that they won't say out loud that they support Trump. Because since I said that I support Hillary Clinton for my personal safety.
I want to get to that,
because I live in California where that's kind of important. I've heard from people who say the same thing. They say, oh my God, I can't say it at work, I can't say it to my family, I can't say it to my friends. How many there are is the great mystery. But I don't think they're being picked up in polling necessarily.